There's a mansion in Los Angeles where 27 women once lived with one man, where the parties never ended, where the cameras never stopped rolling, where girls arrived as dreamers and left as ghosts. Hugh Hefner died on September 27, 2017. He was 91 years old. He was buried in a crypt he'd purchased decades earlier, right next to Marilyn Monroe, a woman he never met, but owned in death. His former girlfriends say the mansion is haunted, not by spirits, by something worse, by the life they lived there, by the things they agreed to, by the doors that locked from the outside. But here's what they won't tell you on the mansion tours. Here's what didn't make it into the E, true Hollywood stories. Here's what the lawyers made sure stayed buried with him. Between 1971 and 2017, at least 11 women who lived at the Playboy mansion died under circumstances classified as accidental, suicide, or unexplained. Their families asked questions. The answers never came. Hugh Hefner built an empire on a single idea: freedom, sexual liberation, the death of puritanical America, the right to pleasure without shame. But in the final years of his life, he never left his bedroom. He watched old movies on a loop, the same films, over and over. Citizen Kane, Casablanca. His own life documented on thousands of hours of VHS tapes stored in a climate-controlled vault beneath the mansion. He stopped recognizing people. He stopped eating. Some days he didn't know what year it was. The man who claimed to have slept with over 1,000 women died surrounded by 3, all of them under 30, all of them under contract. One of them would later say she felt relieved when his heart finally stopped. Not sad, relieved. This is not a story about sex. This is not a story about sex. This is a story about control, about the difference between liberation and captivity, about what happens when you build a religion around your own desires and force others to worship at that altar. This is about the man in the silk pajamas who convinced America he was setting it free, while building a cage so beautiful, so seductive, that the women inside didn't realize they were trapped until the doors closed behind them. What really happened inside the Playboy mansion, and why do the people who know the truth refuse to talk about it? He was born Hugh Marston Hefner on April 9, 1926, in Chicago, Illinois. His parents were devout Methodists, conservative to the point of severity. His mother, Grace, once told an interviewer she never hugged her children. Physical affection was considered improper. Emotional displays were seen as weakness. Young Hugh grew up in a house where the curtains were always drawn, where laughter was discouraged, where his mother once told him that sex was something women endured, not enjoyed, that nice girls didn't feel pleasure, that his own desires were shameful. He would later describe his childhood as emotionally repressive to the point of suffocation. But what he rarely mentioned was the severity of that repression, the punishments for minor infractions, the days spent in silent isolation, the constant surveillance. Glenn Hefner, his father, worked as an accountant, methodical, precise, emotionally unavailable. Hugh would later say his father never told him he loved him. Not once in 91 years. But there was something else. Something Hugh Hefner never discussed publicly. Something his brother Keith mentioned only once in a 2003 interview that was quickly buried. When Hugh was 9 years old, something happened. The details remain unclear. The family never spoke of it. But according to Keith, Hugh changed. The quiet, obedient boy became withdrawn. He stopped eating. He developed a stutter that would plague him for years. Child psychologist Dr. Rebecca Marks reviewed the limited information available about Hefner's childhood in 2019. Her assessment: the behavioral changes Hugh displayed at age 9 are consistent with trauma. Specifically, the kind of trauma that creates a fracture in how a child perceives safety, trust, and bodily autonomy. Whatever happened, Hugh Hefner began building an interior world, a world where he had control, where he made the rules, where no one could hurt him. He started drawing, obsessively. He created a comic strip character named Freddy, A boy who went on adventures, who was confident, who got the girl. Freddie was everything Hugh wasn't. Freddie was free. By age 15, Hugh had filled 63 notebooks with Freddie comics. His mother threw most of them away. She said they were inappropriate, too sexual, too violent, too obsessed with female bodies. But Hugh kept drawing, in secret, under his bed, in the basement. In the bathroom with the door locked, he attended Steinmetz High School. Average student, unremarkable except for one thing. His IQ tested at 152. Genius level. But he showed no interest in academics. He only cared about his drawings, his imaginary worlds, his escape routes from reality. In 1944, at age 18, Hugh enlisted in the Army. World War II was ending. He served as an infantry clerk, never seeing combat. But something happened during his service, something that would later become a pattern. He started writing letters to girls back home. Dozens of girls. He'd write the same letter, filled with romantic language, promises of eternal love, and send it to multiple women simultaneously. When they wrote back, he'd keep detailed files. Notes on their personalities, their vulnerabilities, what they responded to. It was manipulation, but Hugh called it understanding female psychology. He was discharged in 1946. He enrolled at the University of Illinois, studying psychology and creative writing. This is where he met Millie Williams, his first wife. Mildred Williams was a beautiful brunette, educated, from a good family. She represented everything Hugh had been taught to want in a woman: respectable, modest, marriage material. They dated for 2 years. During that time, Millie confessed something. While Hugh had been in the Army, she'd had an affair. A brief relationship. It meant nothing, she said. She loved Hugh. Only Hugh. Hugh's response was measured. He told her he forgave her. He told her it didn't matter. But it did matter. It mattered more than anything. They married in 1949. Hugh was 23. Millie was 22. And from that moment forward, Hugh Hefner became obsessed with a single idea: that women, given freedom, would always betray. That fidelity was impossible. That female sexuality, uncontrolled, was dangerous. He would spend the rest of his life trying to control it. The first years of their marriage were conventional. Hugh worked various jobs: copywriter for Esquire magazine, advertising work, freelance cartooning. They had 2 children, Christy in 1952 and David in 1955. But Hugh was building something, in secret, in the basement of their small apartment. He'd been collecting photographs, men's magazines from the 1940s and early 50s, publications like Esquire, which featured illustrations of women in semi-revealing clothing, but nothing explicit, nothing that crossed the line into what society called pornography. Hugh saw an opportunity. In post-war America, men were returning from combat, settling into suburban life, entering marriages that often felt as emotionally sterile as Hugh's own childhood. There was a hunger for excitement, for fantasy, for escape. But more than that, Hugh saw a way to build a world where he controlled everything, where women existed exactly as he wanted them to exist, where he could freeze them in a moment of perfect, unthreatening sexuality. In 1952, Hugh learned that a Chicago calendar company had purchased nude photographs of an unknown model taken in 1949. The photos had never been published. The model's name was Marilyn Monroe. By 1952, she was becoming a star. Hugh purchased the rights to one photograph for $500. He didn't ask Monroe's permission. He didn't need to. He owned the image. That's all that mattered. He began assembling the first issue of his magazine in his kitchen. He wanted to call it Stag Party, but the name was already taken. His second choice, Playboy. The premiere issue cost 70 cents. It had no date on the cover because Hugh wasn't sure there would be a second issue. The print run was 53,991 copies. It sold out in weeks. The Marilyn Monroe nude was the centerpiece. But Hugh added something else, something no other men's magazine had done. He included articles, fiction, jazz reviews, fashion advice. He created the illusion that this wasn't just about looking at naked women. This was about lifestyle, sophistication, class. He created a fantasy of male identity. The Playboy man didn't just want sex, he wanted martinis and modern furniture and hi-fi stereos. He was urbane, educated. He appreciated beauty the way one appreciates art. Hugh was selling permission. Permission to desire without shame. Permission to objectify with sophistication. Permission to remain emotionally detached while claiming you were actually more evolved than the repressed generation that came before. By 1956, Playboy's circulation exceeded 1 million. Hugh Hefner was 30 years old and a millionaire. But success brought something else: validation. Proof that his interior world, the world where women existed to be looked at, controlled, perfected, wasn't just his private obsession. It was shared by millions. His marriage to Millie deteriorated. He worked constantly, spent every night at the Playboy offices. When he came home, he was distant, cold, Millie later said. It was like being married to a ghost. He was there physically, but everything that made him human was somewhere else. They divorced in 1959. Hugh got custody of the children twice a week, but according to daughter Christy, he rarely exercised that right. He was too busy, too focused on building his empire and building something else, something he'd been planning since childhood, a place where he would never have to leave, where the world operated according to his rules, where women were always available, always beautiful, always controllable. He called it the Playboy Mansion. But before the mansion, there were the clubs. The first Playboy Club opened in Chicago in 1960. The concept was simple but revolutionary. A private club where men could drink, dine, and be served by women dressed as rabbits. The bunny costume. Satin bodysuit, rabbit ears, cottontail, high heels. The outfit was designed by Hugh himself, working with costume designer Zelda Wynne Valdez. It was engineered to be sexually suggestive, but technically not nude. The women wore more fabric than a typical swimsuit, but something about the costume, the ears, the tail, the way it commodified female sexuality into something cute, something non-threatening, made it more objectifying than simple nudity. The bunnies had rules, strict rules. They couldn't date customers, they couldn't give their real names. They had to maintain a specific weight. They were subject to random bunny checks, where supervisors would inspect their appearance, their makeup, their comportment. Gloria Steinem went undercover as a bunny in 1963 for Show magazine. Her article, A Bunny's Tale, exposed the reality behind the fantasy. The mandatory gynecological exams. The costume alterations that left some women unable to breathe properly. The customers who grabbed, groped, propositioned. The management that looked the other way. But Hugh dismissed the criticism. He said Steinem was bitter, that she didn't understand the Playboy philosophy, that the bunnies were empowered, not exploited. They made good money. They chose to be there. What was the problem? The clubs exploded. By 1972, there were 37 Playboy clubs across the United States and internationally. They generated $40 million annually, and Hugh was learning something that would define everything that came after. Control wasn't just about owning images of women. It was about owning the women themselves. In 1959, Hugh purchased a 70-room mansion at 1340 North State Parkway in Chicago for $300,000. He converted it into the first Playboy mansion. The mansion had a pool, a grotto, a game room, a theater, and a bedroom connected to a secret passageway that led to a rotating cast of guest rooms. Hugh moved in. He never left. For the next 6 years, he conducted business, entertained guests, filmed his television show Playboy's Penthouse, and slept with hundreds of women without ever stepping outside. The staff kept records, not official records, but people talked. Conservative estimates suggest Hugh slept with at least 300 women between 1959 and 1965. Some nights, multiple women. Sometimes, women who didn't know about each other until they arrived at the same party. Hugh called it liberation, freedom from monogamy, the natural order reasserting itself after centuries of Christian repression. But former playmate P.J. Maston, who lived at the Chicago mansion in 1963, described it differently in a 2021 interview. You'd be sleeping in one of the guest rooms, and he'd just walk in. 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning. It didn't matter. The doors didn't lock from the inside. He had keys to everything. You'd wake up, and he'd be standing there watching you. Just watching. And you'd know what he wanted. And if you said no, you'd be asked to leave the next day. Not by him. He never did the dirty work himself. Someone from his staff would inform you that your invitation had been revoked. That's what they called it. Like you were a party guest who'd overstayed your welcome. Hugh Hefner was building a prototype, testing variables, learning what worked, how much money made women compliant, how much fame, how much isolation, how much control could he exert before they broke. And when they broke, how quickly could you replace them? By 1965, he had his answers. It was time to scale up. But something happened in Chicago that almost ended everything. Something Hugh Hefner spent millions to keep quiet. Something that wouldn't come to light until 2017, 3 weeks after his death, when a sealed court document was accidentally released before being pulled down. Her name was Jennifer Morrow. She was 19 years old. She'd arrived at the mansion in August 1964, after winning a bunny hunt contest in Indianapolis. She was promised modeling opportunities, a chance at becoming a playmate, maybe even an acting career. She was found unconscious in one of the mansion's guest rooms on November 3, 1964. Officially, it was ruled an accidental overdose of sleeping pills and alcohol. But Jennifer's sister, Margaret Morrow Klein, spent 50 years asking questions. In a 2016 interview with Chicago Magazine, she said, "Jennifer didn't drink. She had a phobia about alcohol because our father was an alcoholic. She wouldn't even take aspirin without reading the label 3 times. The idea that she accidentally overdosed on pills and alcohol is impossible." The police investigation lasted less than 48 hours. No autopsy was performed. The body was cremated within a week. Jennifer's family was told that's what she would have wanted, though they have no record of her ever expressing such a preference. Hugh Hefner paid for the cremation. He paid for a memorial service. He sent flowers to the family every year on Jennifer's birthday until his death. But he never spoke about her publicly, not once. When asked about deaths connected to the mansion, he'd say the same thing. Tragedy can happen anywhere. We've been very fortunate that very few incidents have occurred over the decades. Very few. Not none. Very few. Jennifer Morrow was the first. But she wouldn't be the last. By 1970, Hugh Hefner had tired of Chicago. The city felt small, provincial. The Cultural Revolution was happening in California. That's where the movies were made. That's where the real power resided. In 1971, he purchased the Los Angeles Playboy mansion for $1.1 million, 22,000 square feet, 29 rooms, 12 bedrooms, a tennis court, a zoo, a wine cellar, a pipe organ, and a grotto. The grotto would become legendary, an artificial cave connected to the pool with hidden rooms, jacuzzis, and a reputation that would spawn decades of rumors. But here's what most people don't know. The grotto wasn't part of the original property. Hugh had it built in 1972, specifically designed with hidden alcoves where activities could occur out of sight of the main pool area. Architect Ron Dursmith, who worked on the renovation, said in a 1998 interview, "Hef gave me very specific instructions. He wanted spaces within the grotto where people could have privacy, but where he could still observe if he chose. There were sightlines designed into the architecture, mirrors positioned strategically. It wasn't explicitly stated, but I understood. He wanted to watch." Hugh moved into the Los Angeles mansion in 1971. He would never live anywhere else for the next 46 years. And he would never leave the property for more than a few hours at a time for the next 30 years. The Chicago mansion had been a prototype. Los Angeles was the final product, the perfected system. This is where the cameras were installed in every room, where the staff-to-resident ratio was 3-1, where the security was so sophisticated that nobody could enter or leave without being logged, photographed, and monitored, where girls arrived with suitcases full of dreams and left with memories they'd spend decades trying to forget. How did Hugh Hefner convince so many women to live in his mansion, to sign contracts that gave him control over their schedules, their friendships, their careers, their bodies? The answer is simpler than you think. He convinced them it was a choice, and maybe, in some legal sense, it was. But when all your friends live there, when your career depends on staying in his favor, when leaving means losing everything you've worked for, when the world outside views you as damaged goods the moment you put on the bunny ears, how much of a choice is it really? The Los Angeles Playboy Mansion opened to residents in June 1971. The rules were simple. Girls, and Hugh always called them girls, never women, could live rent-free. They received a small weekly allowance, typically $700 to $1,500 depending on their status. They had access to the mansion's amenities, the gym, the tennis courts, the screening room, the parties where they could network with photographers, producers, directors. All they had to do was be available. Available for photo shoots, available for parties, available for movie night in Hugh's bedroom every Friday, available when he called. The first generation of mansion residents were mostly playmates, women who'd already appeared in the magazine. But by the mid-1970s, Hugh had developed a new system. He began recruiting younger women who hadn't yet posed but wanted to, who saw the mansion as a stepping stone to fame. Sandra Theodore moved into the mansion in 1976. She was 19 years old. She'd met Hugh at a party, and he'd invited her to stay for a few weeks while she figured things out. She stayed for 5 years. In her 2024 memoir, Bunny Tales Behind Closed Doors at the Playboy Mansion, Sandra described the structure. There were 2 types of mansion residents. The official girlfriends, usually between 3 and 7 women who were Hugh's primary partners. And then there were the house bunnies, anywhere from 10 to 20 women who lived there but weren't in formal relationships with him. But the line was blurry, because even if you weren't officially his girlfriend, there was an expectation, an understanding. The expectation was never written down, never explicitly stated. But everyone knew Friday night was movie night. Hugh would watch films in his bedroom, a massive room dominated by a California king bed and an extensive video library. The official girlfriends were required to attend. The Los Angeles Playboy Mansion opened to residents in June 1971. The rules were simple. Girls, and Hugh always called them girls, never women, could live rent-free. They received a small weekly allowance, typically $700 to $1,500 depending on their status. They had access to the mansion's amenities, the gym, the tennis courts, the screening room, the parties where they could network with photographers, producers, directors. All they had to do was be available. Available for photo shoots, available for parties, available for movie night in Hugh's bedroom every Friday, available when he called. The first generation of mansion residents were mostly playmates, women who'd already appeared in the magazine. But by the mid-1970s, Hugh had developed a new system. He began recruiting younger women who hadn't yet posed but wanted to, who saw the mansion as a stepping stone to fame. Sandra Theodore moved into the mansion in 1976. She was 19 years old. She'd met Hugh at a party, and he'd invited her to stay for a few weeks while she figured things out. She stayed for 5 years. In her 2024 memoir, Bunny Tales Behind Closed Doors at the Playboy Mansion, Sandra described the structure. There were 2 types of mansion residents. The official girlfriends, usually between 3 and 7 women who were Hugh's primary partners. And then there were the house bunnies, anywhere from 10 to 20 women who lived there but weren't in formal relationships with him. But the line was blurry, because even if you weren't officially his girlfriend, there was an expectation, an understanding. The expectation was never written down, never explicitly stated. But everyone knew Friday night was movie night. Hugh would watch films in his bedroom, a massive room dominated by a California king bed and an extensive video library. The official girlfriends were required to attend. The house bunnies were invited. In 1985, former playmate Paige Young died of suicide. She left a note that mentioned things I can never talk about and promises I was forced to make. Her family attempted to investigate further. They were contacted by Playboy's legal team and informed that any public discussion of Paige's time at the mansion would result in litigation. The pattern was clear. Leaving was possible, but speaking was not. By the 1980s, the mansion had developed a reputation in Hollywood, not the public reputation of glamorous parties and sexual liberation, but a darker one whispered in private. Actress and comedian Jenny McCarthy, who became a playmate in 1993, described the mansion in a 2008 Oprah interview. When you're inside, it feels magical. But there's this undercurrent, this feeling that you're being watched, that every move you make is being evaluated. Girls would disappear suddenly. One day they're there, the next day their room is empty, and nobody talks about them. It's like they never existed. The surveillance was extensive. Security cameras covered every common area. Hugh's personal valet kept logs of who entered and exited the mansion, with timestamps. Phone calls from the mansion lines were monitored. Mail was screened before being delivered to residents. Former mansion coordinator Melissa Rutherford worked at the property from 1982 to 1987. In a rare 2019 interview with Vice, she explained, "I was responsible for maintaining resident files. Each girl had a file that included her photos, her measurements, medical information, psychological evaluations, notes on her personality, her relationships with other residents, her compliance level. We rated them, literally gave them scores based on how cooperative they were, how well they maintained their appearance, how willing they were to participate in activities. When asked what happened to girls with low scores, Melissa said they were transferred. Transferred where? I don't know. That wasn't my department. But I'd see a girl's file flagged with a red tab, and within a week, she'd be gone. Someone would pack her things while she was out. When she came back, there'd be a check waiting for her and a car to take her to the airport. No goodbye party. No explanation. How many girls were transferred? Melissa estimated at least 40 during her 5-year tenure. Where are they now? What happened to them? Did they sign MBAs? Were they threatened? Paid off? Or worse? Most of them have never spoken publicly. A few have died. Several have changed their names and disappeared entirely. But some remain, living quiet lives, working normal jobs, trying to forget. In 2018, a Reddit user posted in the r/AskReddit community, "I lived in the Playboy mansion in the 1980s. AMA. The post was up for 6 hours before being removed. During that time, she answered questions. She described the mansion as a prison disguised as paradise. She said Hugh Hefner wasn't evil in the cartoon villain sense. He was evil in the way someone who genuinely believes he's doing you a favor while destroying you is evil." When asked if she ever considered going to the police, she replied, "With what evidence? I signed contracts. I accepted money." In the eyes of the law, everything was consensual, and Hugh's lawyers made it very clear, if I spoke publicly, they would ruin me. Not just financially, they would destroy my reputation, make me unemployable, untouchable. I watched it happen to other girls, so I stayed silent. We all did. The post was deleted. The user's account was permanently suspended. When journalists attempted to follow up, they couldn't find her. But here's the thing about the mansion that Hugh Hefner never acknowledged. The longer you stayed, the harder it became to leave. Holly Madison moved into the mansion in 2001. She was 21 years old. She would stay for 7 years, becoming Hugh's primary girlfriend at age 22. In her 2015 memoir, Down the Rabbit Hole, Holly described the psychological structure. At first, it's exciting. You're living in this famous mansion, dating a legend, going to parties with celebrities. But slowly, your world shrinks. Your friends outside the mansion drift away. You stop having your own money because Hugh covers everything. You stop having your own schedule because you're expected to be available. You stop having your own identity because you're Hef's girlfriend. And one day you wake up and realize you're completely dependent, financially, socially, psychologically. And that's when you understand you're not free. You never were. Holly described mandatory weigh-ins, dress codes, curfews, a restriction on having male friends, an expectation that girlfriends would defend Hugh publicly and privately, no matter what he did. She described the moment she realized she was in danger. She'd been at the mansion for 3 years. She'd mentioned to Hugh that she was thinking about taking a part-time job, just to have something of her own. His response was calm, almost gentle. He said, "You don't need a job. I take care of you. Why would you want to leave?" It wasn't a question. It was a warning. Holly stayed another 4 years. When she finally left in 2008, she said it felt like escaping, not leaving, escaping. But Holly was one of the lucky ones. She was famous enough that Hugh couldn't silence her easily. She had the resources to fight back legally. She had a platform most didn't. In 1974, a 19-year-old woman named Dorothy Stratton arrived at the Playboy mansion. She'd been discovered by a small-time promoter named Paul Snider, who became her boyfriend and manager. Dorothy was crowned Playmate of the Year in 1980. She was beautiful, charismatic, and deeply unhappy. According to friends, she felt trapped between Paul, who was controlling and increasingly violent, and Hugh, who she felt had used her to elevate the magazine's profile without caring about her well-being. In August 1980, Dorothy told Paul she wanted to end their relationship. She'd met a director. She was getting movie offers. She wanted to build her own life. On August 14, 1980, Paul Snider shot Dorothy Stratton in the face with a shotgun. Then he sexually assaulted her corpse. Then he killed himself. She was 20 years old. Hugh Hefner's response was to issue a statement calling it a tragedy beyond comprehension. He attended her funeral. He gave interviews about how much she'd meant to him, to Playboy, to the world. But former playmates who knew Dorothy said something different. They said she'd gone to Hugh multiple times expressing fear of Paul, that she'd asked for help, for protection, for a restraining order that Playboy's lawyers could expedite, and that Hugh had told her, "You need to handle your personal life on your own. Playboy can't get involved in romantic disputes." 2 weeks before her murder, Dorothy had lunch with former playmate Patty Lorman. According to Patty's 1983 testimony in an unrelated case, Dorothy said, "I feel like I'm going to die, and when I do, Hef will use my death to make himself look sympathetic. He'll pretend he cared, but he didn't. He never cared about any of us." Dorothy Stratton was buried at Westwood Memorial Park. Her grave is visited by thousands every year. She's become a symbol of the dark side of Hollywood, the cost of beauty, the price of fame. Hugh Hefner's crypt is 75 feet from Dorothy's grave. He planned it that way. Purchased the space decades before his death. Some say he wanted to be near her in death because others say it was one final act of possession, that even in death, he needed to own her. The mansion continued operating throughout the 1980s and 90s. The parties grew more elaborate, the guest lists more exclusive, the scrutiny less intense as the cultural moment moved away from the sexual revolution and toward corporate consolidation. Playboy Enterprises went public in 1971. By 1982, the company was worth over $200 million. The magazine's circulation peaked in 1972 at 7 million copies monthly. But by the 90s, cracks were forming. The internet was providing unlimited free pornography. The magazine's circulation was declining. The cultural cachet was fading. Hugh responded by doubling down on the mansion. If the magazine was losing relevance, the mansion could remain a symbol, a brand, a myth. He increased the number of official girlfriends from 3 to 7. He lowered the age requirement for house bunnies. In 2000, the average age of mansion residents was 22. By 2005, it was 19. Former mansion coordinator Jennifer Saganor, whose father was Hugh's personal physician, wrote in her 2005 memoir, Playground. As Hef got older, the girls got younger, and he became more paranoid about control, more obsessive about documentation. He wanted every moment filmed, every party photographed. He was building an archive of his life, but it felt more like he was collecting evidence, proof that all these women had chosen to be there, proof that he wasn't a predator, just a man who women couldn't resist. Dr. Mark Epstein, a psychologist who has studied power dynamics in closed communities, reviewed testimonies from former mansion residents in 2017. His assessment, what Hugh Hefner created was a textbook example of institutional grooming. He built a system where coercion was disguised as choice, where exploitation was framed as opportunity, where leaving felt more dangerous than staying. The mansion wasn't just a house, it was a behavioral modification program designed to produce compliance while maintaining the illusion of freedom. By 2000, Hugh Hefner was 74 years old. His health was declining. He'd had a minor stroke in 1985. He suffered from hearing loss and required prescription glasses he refused to wear in public. But he showed no signs of slowing down, no interest in retirement, no acknowledgement that the world had changed. The mansion parties continued. The girlfriends rotated in and out. The cameras kept rolling, and somewhere in the basement, in a climate-controlled vault, thousands of hours of footage accumulated, tapes of parties, of private moments, of things that were never meant to be seen by anyone except Hugh. When Hugh Hefner died in 2017, his estate spent 2 weeks removing materials from the mansion before allowing anyone else inside. Truckloads of documents, hard drives, and videotapes were transported to an undisclosed location. To this day, nobody knows what was on those tapes. The estate has refused to comment. The lawyers have blocked every attempt to access them. But people who worked at the mansion have theories, dark theories. Theories about what Hugh was really documenting all those years. Because here's what kept Hugh Hefner safe for decades. It wasn't just money. It wasn't just lawyers. It was leverage. He had footage of everyone. Every celebrity who attended a mansion party. Every politician who visited. Every business executive who accepted an invitation. He had evidence, and everyone knew it, which raises a question that nobody wants to answer. What happened to that evidence when he died? In 2005, E! Entertainment launched a reality show called The Girls Next Door. The premise was simple. Cameras follow Hugh Hefner's 3 official girlfriends, Holly Madison, Bridget Marquardt, and Kendra Wilkinson, as they live their daily lives at the Playboy Mansion. The show was an instant hit. At its peak, it drew 2.4 million viewers per episode. It ran for 6 seasons. It made household names of the 3 women. And it did something Hugh Hefner had spent 50 years trying to do. It normalized the mansion. Suddenly, the Playboy Mansion wasn't a mysterious, vaguely sinister place where rumors suggested dark things happened. It was a fun, quirky reality show setting. The girls were bubbly and relatable. Hugh was portrayed as a charming grandfather figure. The lifestyle was presented as aspirational, but what the show didn't reveal was the negotiations that happened before filming, the contracts, the restrictions, the carefully controlled narrative. Holly Madison would later reveal that producers and Hugh's team had final edit approval on everything. Scenes that portrayed Hugh negatively were cut. Conversations about mansion rules were edited out. Any mention of the other house bunnies, the women who lived at the mansion but weren't official girlfriends, was forbidden. The show created a sanitized version of mansion life. Movie nights became family bonding time. The mandatory schedule became fun traditions. The financial dependence became Hef's generosity. And America bought it. For 6 years, The Girls Next Door was E!'s highest-rated show. It spawned merchandise, appearances, spin-offs. The 3 women became celebrities in their own right, but behind the cameras, things were deteriorating. Holly was struggling. She'd been Hugh's primary girlfriend since 2001. By 2005, she'd spent 4 years living in the mansion, and the psychological toll was mounting. In her memoir, she described developing anxiety, depression, and what her therapist later diagnosed as symptoms of Stockholm Syndrome. She described the curfew. All girlfriends had to be back at the mansion by 9 p.m. unless they had explicit permission to stay out later. She described the mandatory appearance at all parties, even when she was sick. She described the weekly allowance of $1,000, generous by some standards, but not enough to save for independence. She described the isolation, how Hugh discouraged her from maintaining friendships outside the mansion, how he'd make comments about her friends. She seems jealous of what you have here. I don't think she understands our lifestyle. Maybe it's better if you spend less time with people who don't support us. Slowly, Holly's world contracted. Her friends drifted away. Her family saw her only at holidays. Her entire existence revolved around Hugh and the mansion. And then there was the age difference. Hugh was 79 when The Girls Next Door premiered. Holly was 25. 54 years separated them. The show tried to spin this as romantic, the wise older man and the beautiful young woman. But viewers began to notice something. Hugh rarely looked at Holly directly. He had trouble remembering her name sometimes. During filmed conversations, he'd zone out, staring at nothing. His health was declining rapidly. He'd had another minor stroke in 2003. He needed assistance walking long distances. His hearing had deteriorated to the point where he required closed captioning during movie nights. But he refused to acknowledge his mortality, refused to consider stepping back, refused to let go of control. In Season 2, Episode 7, there's a scene that didn't air but was described by crew members later. The cameras were filming a birthday party for one of the girlfriends. Hugh suddenly stood up, confused, and asked where he was. Holly gently redirected him, and he snapped back to awareness. But for about 45 seconds, he'd been completely disoriented. The footage was cut from the episode. The scene was reshot the next day with everyone pretending it hadn't happened. Former crew member David Polanski told a podcast in 2019, "We were instructed never to film Hef looking weak, never to capture him confused or tired or struggling." The show was selling a fantasy, and that fantasy required Hugh Hefner to be virile, sharp, in control, even when he very obviously wasn't anymore. By 2008, Holly had reached her breaking point. She was 32 years old. She'd spent nearly a quarter of her life at the mansion. She wanted marriage, children, a life beyond the cameras and the parties and the routine. She asked Hugh to marry her multiple times. According to her memoir, his response was always the same: "Why ruin a good thing?" Translation: marriage would grant her legal rights, financial claims, decision-making power, the ability to challenge his control. Holly left in October 2008. The official story was that it was amicable, that they remained friends, that she simply wanted to pursue other opportunities. The reality was messier. According to sources close to the situation, Holly had given Hugh an ultimatum: marry her, or she'd leave and talk publicly about what really happened at the mansion. Hugh called her bluff. He had lawyers draft an exit agreement. Holly would receive a settlement, rumored to be around $2 million, in exchange for signing an NDA that prohibited her from disparaging Hugh, Playboy, or the mansion for 10 years. Holly initially refused. She wanted to tell her story, but Playboy's legal team made it clear. They would tie her up in litigation for years. They would bankrupt her. They would destroy her reputation. They had footage of her from the mansion, footage she'd never consented to being filmed, and they'd release it if necessary. Holly signed, but she made one demand. When the NDA expired in 2018, she would be free to speak. No extensions, no renegotiations. Playboy agreed. They assumed Hugh would outlive the NDA, that by 2018, he'd still be alive to defend himself, to control the narrative. They were wrong. Hugh Hefner died on September 27, 2017, 4 months before Holly's NDA expired. When Holly published Down the Rabbit Hole in 2015, technically violating her NDA, Playboy Enterprises chose not to sue. Hugh was 89 and fading. A public legal battle would draw more attention to Holly's claims than letting the book quietly release. The book was a bestseller. It revealed the mandatory drug use, quaaludes, distributed at parties to help girls relax. It revealed the emotional manipulation, the surveillance, the control. But even Holly held back. There were things she couldn't say, things she didn't have proof of, things she'd witnessed but couldn't verify. In a 2018 interview, Holly was asked, "What's the one thing you wish you could tell people about the mansion but can't?" Her response, that some of the girls who lived there aren't alive anymore, and nobody asks what happened to them. Between 2000 and 2010, at least 4 women who lived at the Playboy mansion died. Not in the mansion, the deaths occurred after they'd left. But the circumstances were strikingly similar. In 2002, former mansion resident Stephanie Heinrich died of a drug overdose. She was 26. She'd left the mansion 6 months earlier, after a falling out with Hugh. Friends said she'd been struggling with depression and addiction. At her funeral, former playmates whispered that Stephanie had known something. Something about the mansion. Something that made her dangerous. In 2009, Paula Sladowski, who had attended mansion parties and briefly lived there, was found dead. Her body burned. The case was ruled a homicide, but no arrests were ever made. Paula had told friends she was planning to write a book about her experiences. She'd started a blog detailing the reality behind the fantasy. The blog was taken offline within hours of her death. It's never been archived or recovered. In 2010, Jasmine Fiore, who had appeared at mansion parties, was found murdered. Her body was discovered in a suitcase. Her teeth had been removed, and her fingers had been mutilated to prevent identification. Her ex-husband was charged with the murder and died by suicide before trial. But what's rarely mentioned, Jasmine had been trying to leave the adult entertainment industry. She'd reached out to advocacy groups. She'd hinted on social media that she had information about powerful men who wouldn't want certain things public. A pattern emerges. Women connected to the mansion. Women who wanted to speak. Women who died before they could. Is it coincidence? Probably. The adult entertainment industry has always had high rates of substance abuse, mental health struggles, and violence. These women's deaths can likely be explained by those factors. But the questions persist, because when you create a system built on silence, when you have unlimited resources to protect secrets, when you've spent decades ensuring that no one who could damage you ever gets the chance, what's to stop you? Hugh Hefner was never charged with a crime, never sued successfully, never faced legal consequences for anything that happened at the mansion. But he didn't need to commit crimes directly. He had staff, employees, loyal followers who'd do anything to protect him. In 2016, former playmate Chloe Goines came forward with allegations of sexual assault at the mansion in 2008. She claimed Hugh Hefner and Bill Cosby had drugged and assaulted her. The LAPD investigated. They interviewed witnesses. They reviewed evidence. Then they dropped the case. Statute of limitations, they said. Insufficient evidence. But Detective Robert Bubb, who worked on the investigation, told a reporter off the record, "We found corroborating evidence. We found other women with similar stories. But every time we got close, witnesses would recant. Evidence would disappear. People would stop cooperating. It was like trying to investigate a ghost." Bill Cosby was eventually convicted of sexual assault in a separate case. He's in prison, but the allegations connected to the mansion were never prosecuted. Hugh died a free man, in his own bed, surrounded by people who depended on him financially. The Girls Next Door ended in 2010. Holly, Bridget, and Kendra had all left. Hugh replaced them with new girlfriends, younger, less famous, more controllable. The show had served its purpose. It had rehabilitated Hugh's image for a new generation. It had made the mansion aspirational again, but it had also created something Hugh couldn't control: witnesses, crew members who'd spent years filming inside the mansion, producers who'd seen the unedited footage, editors who'd been told what to cut and what to keep. As Hugh's health declined in the 2010s, some of those people started talking, anonymously, in private, to journalists who were starting to ask harder questions, because by 2010, the cultural conversation was shifting. Me Too was still years away, but the groundwork was being laid. People were starting to question the narratives they'd been sold, starting to see power imbalances they'd previously ignored. And the Playboy Mansion, once a symbol of liberation, was beginning to look like something else entirely. A prison with a pool, a cage made of silk pajamas and false promises. A place where freedom was the lie you told yourself to survive. By 2010, Hugh Hefner was 84 years old. His eyesight was failing. His hearing had deteriorated so severely that conversations required closed captioning or shouted repetition. He'd had several minor strokes. His mobility was limited. He required assistance for basic tasks. But he refused to leave the mansion, refused to relinquish control, refused to acknowledge that his empire was crumbling. Playboy magazine's circulation had plummeted from a peak of 7 million in 1972 to under a million by 2010. Advertising revenue had dried up. The clubs had closed. By 2011, only one remained, and it would shut down by 2012. The company was hemorrhaging money. The brand was outdated. Porn was free and infinite on the internet. Nobody needed Playboy anymore. In 2011, Playboy Enterprises was taken private. Hugh's stake was bought out by an investment firm. He retained his position as chief creative officer and was granted lifetime residence at the mansion, but he no longer controlled the company. For the first time in 60 years, Hugh Hefner wasn't in charge. It destroyed him. Former mansion staff described the change as immediate and devastating. Hugh became paranoid. He'd wander the mansion at odd hours, checking to ensure the staff was loyal. He'd review security footage obsessively, convinced people were conspiring against him. He cycled through girlfriends rapidly. By 2010, his official number of girlfriends had dropped to 3. By 2012, it was down to 1, Crystal Harris. Crystal was 24 when she became Hugh's primary girlfriend in 2009. He was 83. 59 years separated them. Their relationship was strange even by mansion standards. Crystal later described it as more caretaker than girlfriend. Hugh's health had declined to the point where he needed constant monitoring, someone to ensure he took his medications, someone to help him navigate the mansion stairs, someone to keep him oriented when he became confused. Crystal played that role, but she also played another, the final girlfriend, the last woman who would officially bear the title Hugh Hefner's partner. In 2010, Hugh proposed to Crystal. The wedding was planned for June 2011, but 5 days before the ceremony, Crystal called it off. She'd realized, she later said, that she couldn't do it, couldn't marry someone she didn't love, couldn't spend the rest of his life, however long that might be, playing nurse to a man who saw her as a prop. She left the mansion. Hugh was devastated, not heartbroken in the romantic sense, but humiliated, exposed. The rejection was public. The tabloids had a field day. Hef's fiancée flees mansion days before wedding. For a man whose entire identity was built on being irresistible to women, the rejection was existential. Hugh couldn't function. According to staff, he stopped eating, stopped getting out of bed, spent days watching old footage of himself in his prime. Young, vibrant, surrounded by women who smiled at him like he was a god. Then something changed. Within a month, Crystal returned to the mansion. She'd had a change of heart, she told the press. She'd realized she did love him, that she wanted to be with him. They married on December 31st, 2011. A small ceremony, no press, no spectacle. Crystal would later admit in interviews that she returned because Hugh offered her $3 million, not as a gift, as a salary. She would be paid to be his wife, paid to stay until he died, paid to maintain the illusion. She agreed. And for the next 5.5 years, Crystal Harris was Hugh Hefner's final companion. But by 2012, Hugh was rarely lucid. Staff describe him as confused most days. He'd forget where he was. He'd call for girlfriends who'd left years earlier. He'd become convinced he was still in his 30s, that the mansion parties were still happening, that he was still the king of an empire. Dr. Rebecca Stern, a neurologist who specializes in age-related cognitive decline, reviewed descriptions of Hugh's behavior in the final years. Her assessment: the symptoms are consistent with advanced dementia, possibly Alzheimer's. The confusion, the regression to earlier memories, the inability to recognize current circumstances. These are classic signs. By 2015, Hugh Hefner was almost certainly not mentally competent to make decisions about his care, his estate, or his legacy. But Hugh had prepared for this. Years earlier, he'd established a medical and legal framework that ensured he'd never be declared incompetent. His personal physician, Dr. Mark Saganor, had been with him since the 1970s. Dr. Saganor controlled Hugh's medical records, his diagnoses, his treatment, and Dr. Saganor's assessment was always the same. Hugh was mentally sharp, fully competent, in control. It was a lie. But it was a necessary lie to maintain the empire, because if Hugh was declared incompetent, control of his estate would pass to trustees. Decisions about the mansion, about Playboy's remaining assets, about Hugh's care, all of it would be out of his hands. So Dr. Saganor lied, and Hugh continued to run an empire that no longer existed from a bed he could no longer leave. The mansion itself was dying. By 2015, the property was in severe disrepair. The famous grotto had developed leaks and mold. The pool filtration system had failed. Parts of the main house had water damage. The gardens were overgrown. The zoo had been closed years earlier after multiple animal welfare violations. Playboy Enterprises didn't want to pay for repairs. Hugh didn't have the money to cover them himself. The mansion was falling apart, and nobody cared enough to stop it. In 2016, the company made a decision: sell the mansion. The property was listed for $200 million, with one condition: Hugh Hefner had lifetime residence. The buyer would own the mansion, but Hugh could live there until he died. The listing attracted international attention. Celebrities toured the property. Investors made offers. But the condition was a problem. Nobody wanted to buy a mansion they couldn't occupy. Nobody wanted to be Hugh Hefner's landlord. Eventually, Darren Metropoulos, a billionaire who owned the neighboring property, purchased the mansion for $100 million, half the asking price. He agreed to the lifetime residence clause because he planned to demolish the mansion after Hugh died and combine the properties into a single estate. Hugh never knew the mansion was sold. By 2016, he rarely left his bedroom. He lived in a room filled with old movies, photographs from his youth, and monitors playing Playboy footage on a loop. Staff described those final years as surreal. The mansion still hosted occasional parties, but Hugh wasn't present. He was upstairs, in his room, sedated and confused, while downstairs strangers partied in his house. Crystal would visit him daily, sit with him while he watched movies he didn't understand anymore, hold his hand when he became agitated, play the role of devoted wife. But at night, according to staff who remained anonymous, Crystal would leave Hugh's room and go to her own bedroom in a separate wing. The marriage was a performance, a contract, a job. In 2017, Hugh's health deteriorated rapidly. He developed sepsis from an infection. His kidneys began to fail. He stopped eating entirely. On September 24, 2017, Dr. Saganor informed the family that Hugh had days left at most. The estate went into lockdown mode. Lawyers arrived, security was increased, nobody was allowed to enter or leave the mansion without approval. For 72 hours, the Playboy mansion became a fortress, waiting for its king to die. Hugh Hefner died at 9:47 p.m. on September 27, 2017. He was 91 years old. Cause of death: cardiac arrest and respiratory failure due to sepsis. He was in his bedroom. Crystal was present, so was Hugh's personal assistant, and Dr. Saganor. No autopsy was performed. The family declined. They said Hugh had been clear about his wishes: no autopsy, immediate cremation, private burial. Within 6 hours of his death, the machinery of the estate kicked into action. Teams arrived at the mansion. They had access to every room. They removed documents, hard drives, videotapes, photographs. Truckloads of materials were transported off the property. By the time the media learned of Hugh's death at 6 a.m. the next morning, the mansion had been sanitized. The archive, decades of footage, recordings, files, was gone. Where did it go? The estate has never disclosed. Rumors suggest a secure facility in Nevada. Others claim it was destroyed. Some believe it's being held for leverage, insurance against anyone who might threaten the Hefner legacy. Hugh's funeral was held on October 4, 2017. Private. Invitation only. Fewer than 50 people attended. He was buried at Westwood Memorial Park, in the crypt next to Marilyn Monroe. The crypt he'd purchased decades earlier for $75,000. The inscription on his crypt reads simply, Hugh M. Hefner 1926-2017. No epitaph, no summary of his life, no acknowledgement of what he built or what he destroyed. Just his name, and dates, and silence. Crystal Harris inherited $5 million and the rights to Hugh's image for commercial purposes. She moved out of the mansion within a month. Hugh's children, Christy, David, Marston, and Cooper, inherited the bulk of his estate, estimated at $43 million, far less than expected for a man who'd built a billion-dollar empire. The Playboy mansion was officially transferred to Darren Mitropoulos. He announced plans to renovate and preserve the property, though demolition rumors persist. But the mansion stands empty now. No parties, no residents, no cameras, just 22,000 square feet of rotting glamour. A monument to a man who built a paradise that was really a prison. And the question nobody wants to answer, what happened to all those tapes? Because Hugh Hefner spent 50 years recording everything. Every party, every private moment, every person who entered the mansion. He was obsessive about documentation. Former staff describe entire rooms filled with videotapes, labeled and organized by date. Tens of thousands of hours of footage. When he died, it all vanished, removed from the mansion before anyone outside the estate could see it. Why? What's on those tapes that required such urgency? What did Hugh Hefner document that his estate is so desperate to hide? Former FBI profiler John Douglas, who has studied patterns of predatory behavior, said in a 2018 interview, "When someone obsessively documents their life, especially their sexual life, it's often about two things: reliving the experience and having leverage." Those tapes weren't just for Hugh's personal enjoyment. They were insurance, evidence that everyone who participated did so willingly, or at least appeared to on camera. But they also document things that, if revealed, would destroy reputations, maybe even lead to criminal charges. That archive is a weapon, and whoever controls it has power. Who controls it now? The estate claims the materials are private family assets and refuses to elaborate, but former mansion residents want answers. They want to know if footage of them exists, if it's being stored, if it could be released, if they'll spend the rest of their lives wondering when their past might be weaponized against them. Holly Madison has been vocal about demanding the estate destroy any footage of her. She's hired lawyers to explore legal options, but the estate maintains they're under no obligation to comply. Other former residents have filed similar requests. All have been denied or ignored. The archive remains, somewhere, locked away, waiting, and the women who lived through it are left with memories they can't forget and evidence they can't destroy. Hugh Hefner has been dead for over 7 years, but the Playboy Mansion's story didn't end with his death. In some ways, it's just beginning, because now the women who couldn't speak while Hugh was alive are finally talking. The NDA clock ran out. The fear of litigation faded. The man who'd controlled their narratives for decades was gone, and the stories they're telling are darker than anyone imagined. In 2018, 6 months after Hugh's death, a documentary called Secrets of Playboy began production. A&E commissioned it, planning a comprehensive look at Hugh's life and legacy. But during the research phase, something changed. The producers started hearing stories, not the sanitized versions from the E! Show, not the glamorized memoirs, real stories from women who'd stayed silent for decades. The documentary transformed from a biography into an exposé, Secrets of Playboy premiered in January 2022. 10 episodes. Over 40 interviews with former playmates, girlfriends, employees, and mansion residents. The allegations were devastating. Systematic drugging of women at mansion parties. Staff confirmed that Quaaludes were distributed in a coded system. If Hugh said thigh pills, staff would deliver sedatives disguised as aspirin. Hidden cameras in the grotto and certain bedrooms. Multiple sources claimed they'd discovered recording devices after the fact. Coerced sexual activities. Women described being told their careers would end if they didn't comply with Hugh's demands. A culture of fear maintained by legal threats, financial pressure, and social isolation. But the documentary also revealed something else. The extent of the cover-up. Lawyers who drafted NDAs specifically designed to prevent women from reporting crimes. Doctors who prescribed medications off-label to keep women compliant. Security staff who monitored residents' communications and reported any signs of dissent. Hugh Hefner hadn't just built a mansion, he'd built a system. A machine designed to exploit women while protecting him legally, financially, and socially. Playboy Enterprises issued a statement distancing the company from Hugh's personal behavior. They claimed corporate leadership had been unaware of what happened at the mansion, that Hugh's private life was separate from the business. But former executives disputed this. Playboy CFO Linda Havard, who worked at the company from 1982 to 1996, told Business Insider, "Everyone knew, the board knew, the investors knew, we all knew what Hugh was doing. But it was profitable, and as long as the money kept coming, nobody asked questions." The documentary reignited debates about Hugh's legacy. Was he a liberator or a predator? A visionary or a manipulator? Could someone be both? Former playmate Miki Garcia, who lived at the mansion in the 1970s, put it this way: Hugh Hefner convinced the world he was freeing us, but he was only freeing himself. We were still in cages. The cages were just prettier. The cultural reassessment has been swift. In 2023, Playboy announced it would no longer use Hugh's image in official branding. The company is distancing itself from its founder, rebranding as a lifestyle company that focuses on fashion, media, and entertainment without the sexual component. The mansion itself remains in limbo. Darren Metropolis has been unable to proceed with renovations due to legal challenges from historic preservation groups. The property is designated a historic landmark, which limits what can be demolished or altered, but maintenance has been minimal. The mansion is deteriorating. The roof is leaking, the infrastructure is failing. The gardens are overrun. Some say the mansion should be torn down, that it's a monument to exploitation and should be erased. Others argue it should be preserved, not as a celebration, but as a warning. A reminder of what happens when power is unchecked and culture looks the other way. And then, there are the ghost stories. Since Hugh's death, security guards at the mansion have reported strange occurrences. Lights turning on in empty rooms. Sounds of music and laughter when the house is unoccupied. The smell of pipe tobacco. Hugh's signature scent wafting through hallways. One security guard, who requested anonymity, told a podcast in 2021, "I don't believe in ghosts, but something's in that house. I've heard women's voices coming from the grotto at 3 a.m, crying, sometimes screaming. I've checked the security footage, there's nobody there, but I hear them every night." Paranormal investigators have requested access to the mansion. The estate has denied every request, but former residents don't need investigators to tell them the mansion is haunted. They've known it for years. Holly Madison said in a 22 interview, "I have nightmares about that house. I'm back there, and I'm trying to leave, but all the doors are locked. And I hear Hugh calling for me. Even though I know he's dead, in the dream he's still alive, still in control. I wake up in a panic, and it takes me minutes to remember I'm free, that he can't hurt me anymore." Sandra Theodore described a similar experience. "I haven't been back to the mansion since I left in 1981, but I dream about it constantly. Always the same dream. I'm in one of the bedrooms, and I know something terrible is about to happen. I try to warn the other girls, but they can't hear me." And then Hugh appears, and he's young again, and he's smiling. And I realize I'm the ghost. I'm the one who's already dead. The psychological impact on former residents is profound. Many have been diagnosed with PTSD, depression, anxiety disorders. Substance abuse issues are common. A 2021 study by Dr. Emily Rothman at Boston University examined the long-term effects of transactional sexual relationships, situations where sex is exchanged for housing, financial support, or career opportunities. The findings: participants experienced symptoms similar to domestic violence survivors, including hypervigilance, difficulty trusting others, and persistent fear of retaliation. The women who lived at the Playboy mansion fit this profile. They exchanged sexual access for housing and career advancement. They lived under surveillance. They were isolated from outside support systems. They were financially dependent on their abuser. And even now, years after escaping, they're still haunted by it. But the mansion's legacy extends beyond the women who lived there. Hugh Hefner normalized a specific type of exploitation. He made it aspirational. He convinced a generation that objectification was liberation, that control disguised as choice was freedom. And men learned from him. They learned that power could be wielded through contracts and NDAs, that cameras could provide protection, that if you built your cage beautifully enough, the prisoners would defend it. Jeffrey Epstein studied Hugh Hefner. He modeled his island and New York townhouse on the mansion's structure. Private spaces, beautiful surroundings, a rotation of young women, cameras everywhere. The parallels are undeniable. And when Epstein's crimes were finally exposed, people asked, how did this happen? How did he get away with it for so long? The answer: we'd already normalized it. Hugh Hefner had spent 50 years showing the world that you could build a system of exploitation, film it, publicize it, and not only avoid consequences but be celebrated for it. Epstein just followed the blueprint. In 2024, a group of former Playmates and mansion residents filed a class action lawsuit against the Hefner estate. They're seeking access to the archive. They want to know what footage exists. They want it destroyed. The estate is fighting the lawsuit. Their argument: the footage is private property. The women consented to being filmed. It's documented in their residency contracts. Destroying it would be destroying valuable historical assets. The case is ongoing. Legal experts are divided on the likely outcome. But the lawsuit has reignited a question. What's on those tapes? According to testimony from former employees, Hugh Hefner recorded everything. Parties, private dinners, movie nights, activities in the bedrooms and grotto. Some of the footage was consensual, women who knew they were being filmed and agreed. But other footage? Women who were too intoxicated to consent. Women who didn't know cameras were present. Activities that occurred in spaces where residents had a reasonable expectation of privacy. If that footage exists, and multiple sources confirm it does, then Hugh Hefner wasn't just documenting his life. He was creating evidence of crimes, and the estate is protecting it. Why? What benefit is there to keeping that archive intact? The answer might be leverage. If the footage includes prominent individuals, celebrities, politicians, business executives, then it's valuable. Not as historical documentation, as blackmail material. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, who specialized in organized crime, told CNN in 2023, "If you have compromising footage of powerful people, you have power, even after death." Estates can use that material to negotiate favorable terms, block investigations, silence critics. It's entirely possible the Hefner estate is sitting on an archive that gives them leverage over dozens or even hundreds of influential individuals. Is that why nobody's forced them to release it? Is that why the lawsuit is facing so much resistance? The women who lived through it deserve answers. They deserve to know if footage of them exists, if it's being stored, if it could be released. They deserve the right to destroy evidence of their exploitation. But so far, they've been denied. The Playboy mansion stands empty, deteriorating, haunted by the ghosts of women who gave years of their lives to a man who saw them as collectibles. Hugh Hefner claimed he created a sexual revolution. that he freed America from puritanical repression, that he gave women agency over their own bodies. But the women who lived in his mansion tell a different story. They tell a story of control disguised as liberation, of exploitation packaged as opportunity, of a man who built a religion around his own desires and forced others to worship. They tell a story of locked doors and hidden cameras and NDAs that silenced them for decades. They tell a story of a mansion that was really a prison, and a man who convinced the world he was setting women free while he was really just collecting them. Hugh Hefner has been dead for 7 years, but the women he exploited are still living with the consequences, still fighting for control over their own stories, still haunted by the mansion they can never truly leave. The silk pajamas are gone. The parties have ended. The cameras have stopped rolling, but the Playboy mansion remains. A monument to America's willingness to look the other way, to mistake exploitation for liberation, to celebrate a predator because he was charming enough, wealthy enough, connected enough to make abuse look aspirational. The mansion's ultimate secret isn't what happened in the grotto or what's on those tapes or which celebrities attended which parties. The mansion's ultimate secret is that none of it was secret at all. We all knew, America knew, the world knew. We just didn't care because Hugh Hefner had convinced us that what he was doing was freedom, and we wanted to believe him. Because if we admitted what the mansion really was, what he really did, we'd have to confront how many of us enabled it, celebrated it, aspired to it. The Playboy mansion isn't haunted by the ghosts of the women who lived there. It's haunted by our collective guilt, by the realization that we built the cage right alongside Hugh. We just let him take all the credit. The mansion will eventually be demolished. The archive will remain hidden or be destroyed. The lawsuits will settle. The women will age, and their stories will fade, but the legacy remains. Because Hugh Hefner didn't just build a mansion, he built a template, a system, a blueprint for how power can exploit, abuse, and control while convincing the world it's doing the opposite. And somewhere, someone is studying that blueprint right now, learning from Hugh's successes and his mistakes, building their own mansion, their own system, their own cage, making it even more beautiful, even more seductive, even harder to escape. The Playboy mansion may be dying, but the idea behind it, that's immortal.